Everybody, welcome to Unit Three's Topic 5, Hosting and Hosting for Legitimacy. We've referred to hosting a number of times already this class, where you talk about a host who's in charge of staging an Olympiad, a World Cup, any other sort of competition. It could be the Francophone Games, it could be the International Surfing Association competitions, it could be a Cricket World Cup. There's ample opportunities to host in all kinds of sporting events at all kinds of age levels all around the world. This is kind of fraught with issues no matter what, in terms of who controls what the big sporting bingos want to have happen in host countries. But it becomes even more complicated when states are using the hosting of the games for particular political purposes. In other words, to establish some form of legitimacy in the eyes of the rest of the world, to say that our ideas and our approach works and you approve of us, that's why you let us host the event. And we'll look at some of the reasons why states do that here in a little bit. But let's start with a quick review here of several places that hosted both an Olympics and a World Cup in approximation to each other, and just see if you can tell a difference. So here's the first one. This is World Cup 94 and Summer Olympics 1996. This is the World Cup in 2014 and the Olympics in 2016, Summer Olympics that is. And this is the Winter Olympics in 2014 and the World Cup in 2018. So there is listed on there a difference, something distinct from the other. And let's review them real quick. This is their all-time host. We'll go back to this. But if you look here, you should notice that when you see a World Cup, it's USA, it's Brazil, it's Russia. And when you see an Olympic, it's Atlanta, Rio, and Sochi. Because, as it turns out, countries host World Cups and cities host Olympics. So one of the more complicating factors in Olympiads versus World Cups is that theoretically it's a city that bids on the Olympics. And that becomes very kind of confusing when you look at the bidding process and you see that heads of state are involved. They are, because they're trying to show that the country's behind an event. But the reality is that it's actually a mayor of an event that's in charge. So when you had, for example, the opening ceremonies of the London Olympics, they're officially opened by the mayor of London, not the head of state, though the head of state has a ceremonial role there as well. So one of the things that you'll want to look at going ahead is, what are the records of the cities versus the country? So a lot of times you'll say, man, China is hosting the Olympics. Look at what China's human rights record, etc. is. And the Olympics would argue, the IOC would argue, that they in fact awarded the games to Beijing, not to China. And so it's what Beijing's record is. And that sort of absolves them of a lot of complicity in all sorts of human rights violations and other things that you might ascribe to the country that don't devolve to the city. Sure, there's people in the city who do things that are against sort of global norms, but it's the country that's really responsible. So the IOC can dance around some of these things by saying, no, it's not the Russia Olympics, it's the Sochi Olympics, and we need to pay attention to what Sochi is up to. Now, that's a canard. It's sort of fake, because Vladimir Putin was all over the Olympics in Sochi, and he was one of the main movers and shakers with his cronies and the like, and Russian laws and rules were the ones that were germane there, but the IOC would at least argue differently. Okay, here's a list of all-time hosts of the four big events, and in this case we're counting the Women's World Cup as the other big event, as opposed to the Rugby World Cup or the Cricket World Cup, which would be a different sort of list. But in particularly the first three are the major ones, the ones that get the most global attention, most money, and most sponsorships. And you'll see that the hosting of the events are categorically ascribed mostly to Europe, the USA, and Canada. In fact, if you do Europe, USA, and Canada for your all-time hosts of the Olympics, you come with 21 Summer Games compared to only 7, and 20 Winter Games compared to only 3 in the rest of the world. In the World Cup, you have 13 compared to 10, which is much closer. Women's World Cup, 6 compared to 8. So all-time host is definitely weighted in favor of the developed world. That means that if there's a tournament assigned to, a hosting job assigned to a country in a particular region, then you have more weight devolved to that than might otherwise be the case. For example, the Men's World Cup held in South Africa in 2010 became a very big deal because they were the first host of any of the major sporting events, and sort of became this idea that they were representing the continent even as much as they were representing themselves. How does it work? Well, here's how the Olympics works itself. So a NOC, remember that phrase from earlier in the semester? A NOC is a National Olympic Committee. They submit a bid on behalf of a city, and they become something called applicant cities. So what you basically do is, say in the United States, we host bids. The USOC hosts bids from cities in the United States that want to host particular Olympics. If there's anyone who does, then they vet those bids and they pick one internally. So in the candidature for the upcoming Summer Games in 2024, we had a whole host of cities bid, including New York and San Francisco and Boston, and the United States Olympic Committee picked Boston. That means Boston becomes an applicant city. Okay, so then applicant cities from all over the world who are chosen by their NOCs to go forward to potentially host the games, they submit reports. And if they meet certain standards, they become candidate cities. So you become an applicant city, you shift to a candidate city. That's if you have the right amount of internal capacity to host the games, which is a curious thing that FIFA doesn't have. It's one reason why when Qatar bid on the 2022 games, they were able to skip this step because they didn't meet the standards. So they were just sort of they were a candidate country anyway. Candidate cities. Evaluation committees come in. So that's the International Olympic Committee. That's athletes themselves. That's the IFs and bingos, other experts, the Paralympic people. Other people come in, receive the report, they make visits, they submit evaluations, and then the IOC members vote. So who are the members who vote? Well, in Singapore 2005, there were 116 active IOC members. Now remember, when we looked at membership earlier in the semester, that a member of the IOC was an individual, often a former athlete, sometimes a former administrator of sport. It wasn't a member state. The members are individuals. So you had 160 active IOC members, and they were the ones who were able to determine the host for 2012, which was in London. You aren't allowed to vote if you're from a country with a candidate city involved, so that took 14 people out right away. 4 others had some other thing going on, so that meant that 99 people, individuals, decided on who would host the 2012 Summer Olympics. And as you go forward, one of the things you have to pay attention to is who are the IOC members? What sort of power and influence do they have? And in 2011, there was a vote to determine who was going to host what became the Rio Olympics. There were 113 active members, and you have to look at who's the longest serving, because the longer and more skillfully one serves, the more influence you have over your fellows. Right? It is sort of a political environment, and the person who has been around the longest, who's done the most favors for other people, they have the most ability to influence the outcome. So former FIFA President João Havelange, he was the longest serving member. And so when it came time to vote on whether Madrid or Tokyo or Rio or Chicago would host the games, let me see if I got that list here. Nope, don't have it there, so we won't go to it. When it came time to vote on who got to host the games, then his influence carried a lot of weight, and Brazil was chosen to host. Now, they had some other things going in their favor. First, the whole country was behind it. They're not anymore, but they were at the time. They had the head of state very excited. They hadn't had an Olympics in South America, so it was considered a big deal. But João Havelange's presence there meant a lot. There's opportunities for abuse throughout the system, right? So if you look at this list here, you've got the NOCs, right? So the NOCs can be corrupt. They can abuse the system when you're choosing your bid cities. The evaluation committee members who are going to say where you rank on a scale of 0 to 100, and it's actually a scale of 0 to 100 on different items. You can bribe them, you can influence them, and the IOC members themselves can be influenced when it comes time to vote. And if we made a list similar to this for FIFA and the World Cup, it'd be the same sort of thing. You have the IFs, right, who have control of selection of regional candidatures. You have evaluation committees, and you have FIFA members when it comes time to vote. There's opportunities to vote for abuse all throughout the system. It's one of the big problems we have in naming hosts for big sporting events around the world. So now let's shift to talking about this. So the question is now legitimacy. How does all this play into a country using hosting an Olympiad to be a way to announce themselves sort of on the global stage and say, we matter, we're here, and you acknowledge us. It reminds me of a situation I remember watching at the Oscars many years ago. One of the actresses, Sally Field, she won Best Actress, and when she won it, one of the things she was saying, instead of just thank you, she was saying, you like me, I now know that you like me. And so this is sort of like when the country's coming and will you pick me as a host, even if I have some questions about me, it's like, you like me. Thank you so much, I'm really glad we're a host, but you like me. It's sort of a self-validation thing. And they can use it for legitimacy in a variety of areas. So here's one of them. The first one would be rehabilitation. So you're talking about whether you can use sports to rehabilitate an image or rehabilitate a city. And 2 times in particular, the hosting for legitimacy has taken on this rehabilitation cast. So the first one is in 1948 in London when they hosted the Olympic Games, which was the first Olympiad after World War II. And there is an opportunity to follow a optional bonus bit to listen to a BBC story about the Olympics here that were held in the aftermath of World War II. The city hadn't been rebuilt completely. People hadn't returned to normal lives, right? The war ended in 1945. It was rough times, but if you wanted a chance for this to show the rebirth of hope, the statement of intent, we're going to be great again. This hosting of the Olympic Games in 1948 was very much part and parcel of that. 1972 in Munich is a little bit different. This is sort of Germany finally coming out of the shadow of Nazism, right? So we looked a little bit before at extremist regimes in defining a nation where the Nazis hosted the Olympics in 1936, and the whole Olympiad was sort of given over to this martial, sort of oppressive, heavy-handed statement about the greatness of the Nazis and the problems with all the rest of us. 1972 was called the Friendship Games, where the organizers in Munich were going to show that Germany was a very different sort of place, that it had rehabilitated and it was ready to rejoin the family of nations in big ways, and not to be sort of embarrassed about who they were. It's a case where Germany, for a lot of the post-war era, very much felt the stigma of losing, not just having lost, but having caused much of World War II, and felt sort of a collective embarrassment. And this is the first step in a long one that some would say begins in 1972 in Munich and ends in 2006 when Germany hosted the World Cup, to say this is us coming back out of our shadow, to say, yes, we are German. We're sorry that all of that happened, but this is who we can be. This is our chance to have sort of this statement of intent to be great in the world sphere. How about recognition? So 2 times in particular, recognition has been the main thing. So this would be the first Olympics held in a developing country in Latin America in 1968 in Mexico City. And this one is a little different. If you see the image here, it says Mexico 68 instead of Mexico City 68. Well, part of that is because, Mexico is an abbreviation for Mexico City. It's like sometimes we say Washington and not Washington, D.C., right? It's just part of that extra thing of the capital city. But these are both sort of representative of their region as well. When Mexico City hosted in 1968, Mexico was in the midst of something called the Mexican Miracle. It was extremely sustained and exciting growth in their economy. There was stability in their politics. There were problems associated with that. We don't have time to go into those right now. If you're ever curious, you can send me an email and I can send you some links. But this is this statement of them coming forward. They also then hosted the World Cup in 1970. South Africa 2010, very much that same way. Is South Africa coming to the fore? Are they capable, modern nation? And many people would say that yes, that after South Africa 2010, they have that sort of cachet. We got an article that compares the hosting of these two that you will read for this unit. The next one would be hosting with the mosting, the host with the most. And there's a couple of Gulf states. In particular, this is the United Arab Emirates, and located just up off the corner of the map here is Qatar, who are using hosting sporting events to show their greatness. They're using sporting events to show what they can do in terms of all sorts of other things. What they want to do is attract modern businesses, particularly service industry jobs. They want to attract tourists. They want to attract shoppers. They want to attract people to the Gulf. And the way they're going to do that is to host all kinds of sporting events, from major golf tournaments to tennis tournaments to Grand Prix events to different Taekwondo events. They're going to host the Cricket Council there. They're going to host all kinds of friendlies there between major European teams. They're going to let European teams come to training there. They're going to set themselves up as the entrepot. They're going to be the place where you want to go to do it. And they're using that sort of to do a long-term, instead of hosting a one-off event, they're going to do lots of hosting to remind you of them over and over and over again. And maybe in sort of an extreme example of this, they're even building something called Dubai Sports City. So Dubai Sports City is supposed to be this environment where you're going to have integrated sports, work, living, and shopping all in one place. And the plans for it are really quite remarkable, where you'll have people come in from all over the world who can just sort of live there. You can say, I'm going to attend these sporting events all the time, a wide range of them at world-class facilities. The shopping will be right there. The living will be right there. You can get a job at one of the many skyscrapers, etc. They're in Dubai Sports City. So maybe that's hosting with the mosting taken to its extreme. Well, what does this all mean? It means that that you have opportunities to host. They abound. Because all we really looked at here was a couple of major tournaments, but again, you have them at different levels, different parts of the world, different regional games, etc. They abound. Some states use these events to generate international status, aware of the opportunities for abuse. They know that there's abilities to abuse the system if they need to, and so do the voters in deciding who's going to host. There's more to it than this, and hopefully the readings will help clarify that for you as we go forward.